Hello everyone. Throughout the season of Lent, a priest read from the office of readings from the book of Exodus. And office readings is part of the liturgy hours that a priest has to pay from 5 times a day. But throughout the season of Lent, we read from Exodus. And Exodus, like on the outside, like whenever I always think back to, I always forget throughout the Lenten season how long it is and how many different things happen in the Exodus story. Because a lot of times I think kind of simplify it down to people are in slavery to Egypt, people then are freed by God through the 10 plagues, and then Moses leading them across the water from slavery in Egypt, and then they journey across the desert, and then they reach the promised land. Like that's kind of like the way in which I simplified it in my head, right? But the reality is they spent 40 years wandering in the desert. They spent 40 years, the Israelites did, wandering from Egypt to the promised land. And as we look at that journey, and as we look at also, I think what we're experiencing in Beacons is something similar. Sure, unlike, the story of Exodus, everything's probably not bad. Everything is not bad in our parishes before Beacons started. You had your priest, you had your personnel, your staff, and we had all of our ways of doing things, which we're all comfortable in. Worked, right? So it's not, again, nothing claimed that it's not working. But the question is just simply having our own priest, that we, having our own priest, having our own personnel, and just having everything the way we always have, is that like all the Lord wants for us? Like, honestly, looking at it that way, like, is this all the Lord wants from us? It's just simply for our parish to be there. And of course they do good work. They provide the sacraments. They give all these other things. And there's a lot of other good things that our parishes do. But the question is the Lord never permits something to happen without desiring to bring good out of it. Whichever way you feel about Beacons, about the process itself, the goal is clear. For us to become a unified family of parishes. For us to become a larger family. And the good that can come from that is, there's a lot of good that can come from that, but a lot of it remains to be unseen. It's uncertain of exactly how that's all going to work. And so I think in the Exodus story, perhaps I would encourage you to read through it and just see in there that there's always some similar things that happen. We're kind of entering into the desert now. There's a lot of things we have to, the Lord needs to strip the Israelites of a lot of things. They have to be stripped of their worship of false gods, which, kind of is actually brought out whenever the Lord brings Moses up into the, up on the mountain, and then whenever he leaves for a little bit, they get scared, and then they make a molten calf. They make an idol in order to take the place of Moses, because they put Moses on this pedestal. So it's indicated that they're not so much trusting the Lord as much as they were trusting Moses at the time. And I think the lesson here for us is that in the midst of everything that we are experiencing and undergoing as a family of parishes or throughout the Archdiocese with Beacons of Light, is that the Lord has so much more in store for us on the other side of this. We need to go through some of these difficult decisions and these difficult processes, not because we just need to suffer, but because on the other side of that suffering there is something good, something really, really good. And the Lord has so much in store for us and for others. And he wants to draw us more deeply into his own life and the mystery of his life, death, and resurrection. And he wants more for us. He wants us to experience the fullness of his grace and his truth. But that can only happen whenever we let go. Whenever we let go of our expectations of what exactly God is supposed to do in our lives. He has to do it this way. The priests have to do it this way. The parish has to do it this way. And instead begin imagining, what does the Lord want in this? How can he bring good from a situation that I don't like, that I don't particularly care for? What is the good that's happening? And I think that that's something really important for us to reflect on. And, I invited people just to say, what's been good about the past 8 months? And someone responded, there's been nothing good. And that just made me really sad. Both because, they haven't seen any good, but also made me sad because, whenever we don't see anything good, that doesn't mean nothing good has happened. In fact, quite the contrary often. There's a lot of good happening, but we often are unable to receive it. We are unable to receive the good that the Lord desires to bestow upon each and every one of us. He wants to heal you. He wants to heal every human heart. And getting there is so darn difficult. And the Lord doesn't simply want for us to just simply survive, to maintain. He wants to see people come alive in him. You know, St. Irenaeus said the full glory of God is a human being fully alive. He wants to be fully alive. He wants saints. He wants people on fire with the gospel. And again, there's people that are there. But at the same time, if we think that we've reached that kind of plateau to where everything's great, we've missed the point. And I get it. It's hard. I've even come across this in just a situation over the past weekend with my own personal life in which I see my own desire to just simply keep things the way they are, to control, to make sure that it's always the way it has been and the way I want it to be, instead of allowing the Lord to work as he pleases and trusting that no matter what happens, he's going to do what's best for me. And coming to that realization, like, oh my gosh, I've been like standing in the Lord's way, and I stand in the way of friends seeking our Lord. I was just struck to my core with, that's a lot. That's tough. And it's not going to be an easy change. I'm still not particularly like looking forward to the ways in which the Lord's invited me in that situation to surrender and to trust and to let go. But at the same time, I know that if I think about it, it's like, now that this is here, like 6 months from now, like if I stop trying to hold on to what it was and let it be what it's going to be, 6 months from now, my life's going to be better. What that means, I don't know exactly. But I know that if I let go of my control, my expectations of what I want, in that area of my life, I recognize there's going to be something really, really good on the other side of it. And I think that's the case with beacons too. Are there things that are going to be lost? Of course. That's part of it. But it's also, pruning's also a part of any process. The Lord makes that very clear in, John chapter 15, where Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. And that's obviously an image that also comes with the connotation of pruning. That he's going to prune our hearts. He's going to prune us, not because he's trying to just simply take something away. He's trying to make room for new growth. He's trying to make room for growth within our lives so that we can trust him more. Just as he had to remove people from Egypt and give them some time in the desert to bring forth more fruit in the promised land, because they still doubted him. They kept on questioning, how's the Lord going to provide for us in this? And he would again and again. In the same way, the Lord has continued to provide for us. Perhaps not the ways that we've expected or we wanted, but nonetheless, he has cared for us. He has been there for us. And he has ultimately always found his faithful wherever his church is. And he wants to find us there too. He wants to meet us in this space, in this area of pain that we're going through, in this desert. It's a long journey. It's a hard journey. And change is always difficult. But the Lord wants to see us through. He wants to help us to embrace his promises and to let go of our expectations, our control, and allow him to work. And whenever we begin to allow him to do that, there will be much fruit that's brought forth. He'll prune us and then bring forth new and amazing forms of growth that we can't even imagine. And I think in a practical way of like thinking about this too, for an example from my life, is, I used to play a lot of video games in college, from high school and then into a few years into college seminary. And then I think it was my junior year of college seminary, I had this sudden realization, like, these video games are taking a lot of time from me, from my friends, from my studies, and from my prayer. And I remember receiving this conviction in my prayer that I need to let go of that Xbox 360, which I don't know which Xbox they're on now. I think there was an Xbox One. I don't know if there's a new one, but anyway, sorry. But I realized this wasn't like necessarily a bad thing. So it wasn't like video games evil. It was more like, okay, video games were fun, and they even were enabled me to socialize in high school and even to an extent in college seminary. I'm playing those with other guys, other seminarians, my classmates, my friends in high school. But at the same time, it was also holding me back from something more that the Lord wanted for me. And so I decided to sell my Xbox. I sold it, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, making a holy hour wasn't such an imposition. All of a sudden, making time for a rosary each day was no longer as much of an imposition. All of a sudden, my grades went up. And I started actually being a much more effective student. It wasn't necessarily bad beforehand, but I became a much more engaged, interested student and really dove into a lot of the research projects that we had in school and even in my friendships. I started making a space for the people around me to enter into relationship with me, to share my heart with them and for them to share their heart with me. And this is also the space in which the Lord is inviting us. There is not anything necessarily bad about the way things have been done. There's not anything necessarily bad about the way in which other parishes are doing it. But I do want you to know that we have prayed about this a lot. And I have prayed about this video a lot. And I just want you to know that the Lord has something more in store for us. Again, do I know fully all the ways that's going to happen? No. But I do want us to be focused more on the Eucharist. I do want our priest to be more focused on being priest, being available for confessions, personal contact, not just merely, just being available to be available, but also to be targeted and being able to teach and being able to meet people for spiritual direction, to help guide them in their spiritual lives, to help walk them through some painful things they may be going through in their personal lives, whether it's grief, whether it's some sort of addiction, whether it's anything like that. I want our priest to be available to also be able to pray more, to be open to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, to also be more well-rounded so that they have time to study what the church teaches, study what best practices are. A lot of that stuff we're kind of so crammed with work that we don't have time to actually become, to take training on, to become better at our jobs, to become better preachers, to become better counselors, to become better confessors, to become just better men and better priests. And then for, all of you to become more focused on the Eucharist, to put that at the heart of everything we do. To make our parishes about faith in Jesus Christ first and foremost. That the community is centered around him, the Lamb who sits upon the throne. For us to be evangelistic, to make missionary disciples, to encourage people to go out and share the good news with one another. That our conversations over time, and none of this stuff is necessarily bad, but to make more of our conversations about the things of the Lord, to have a supernatural outlook. Talk about a relationship with Jesus, about the tough things that are going on in our life, talk about the good things going on in our life, to be able to talk with others about how our faith has changed us. It's made us better. About how Jesus Christ has truly transformed our hearts to move us away from sin, from lust, from gluttony, from greed, from gossip, from fear. Those are all the things that the Lord has in store for us if we but trust him. And I know it's hard, it's difficult. And I don't have all the answers. But that's what I want to see on the other side of this. That we're going through a certain kind of pruning process that's going to enable us to let go, and then let's go to the Lord.